Hello and welcome to another Pharaoh stream with myself, Pharaoh. Welcome. I've worked through lunch today to be able to bring you this stream. And it's a continuation of the series on interwar art at the Royal Academy. First off, just want to apologise for the abrupt end of the last stream. The internet cut out. I'm also going to try and keep these relatively tight because it's going to take up a lot of time otherwise. And I just wanted to kind of summarize the last, the kind of the first year that we looked at. And again, my view was that it's an interesting mix of old and the new. There's definitely, maybe like a lingering trace of some of the kind of more historical paintings, classic portraiture. But I still think that it's relatively radical, especially for the Royal Academy and some of the kind of works that are in there. And I think we're going to continue to see some of that relative radicalness from the Academy here. But let's get straight into it. And we're going to look at our first piece here. And it's a little bit of sculpture from a guy called Pomeroy, F.W. Pomeroy. Now, I've mentioned the new sculpture group quite a few times now. And I would say that Pomeroy is, again, one of the guys towards the kind of back end of that. Definitely not one of the kind of A-tier guys, if I'm honest with you. I would put him in a kind of a bit B-tier new sculpture group. But there are quite a few of his pieces of work that I quite like, and this certainly caught my attention. This piece here is called Victory. And, it's an allegorical piece, maybe a reflection on the kind of First World War. We've got this figure with the laurels being held in her right hand, the sword in her left, and she's on this kind of globe-like figure. And she's got a laurel wreath on her head, a breastplate to kind of show that she's a fighter. I mean, I really like the wrapped up sword here. I think that's a really interesting bit of symbolism. Not quite swords to plowshares here, but certainly sword finished with, and it's kind of been taken off. I mean, the figure itself isn't, again, mind-blowing in terms of its novelty or interest, but it's just a good, solid B plus figure. In terms of Pomeroy himself, he's another Lambeth boy, Lambeth School of Art, and again spent some time in France. Sort of moved around from place to place, but really from the 1890s got started with sculpture. And again, I think he just made a good account of himself here. A nice piece to start off this year. Now, we kind of finished up with Morley last time, and we've got a piece here that has a little bit more depth to it here. The night passes and the day cometh. And again, this is maybe look at an allegorical, symbolic scene where we've got 3 women at the front and 4 men at the back, and they're all in different levels of like dressness, and they're all kind of doing different things. And this is obviously the kind of allegorical passing of the day, the kind of cyclical nature. Now, a couple of things I didn't really have a chance to talk about last time with Morley. Yes, definitely inspired by, I would say, kind of like late, almost kind of Gothic Renaissance kind of figures. One figure more contemporary that I should have put in there is, I mentioned, is Puvis de Chavannes, who, again, we've mentioned on the Symbolist stream that we did ages ago. But I think this is a very Puvis piece. He tends to have these kind of quite long canvas landscape pieces, very centered, very very well structured either side compositionally, and again the colors here with the blues and purples very Pouvrier at the same time. But I think he's trying to do something different with it, with the figures. Again, apology, this is a real potato-sized image. This is the largest size color I could get, but you still get an idea of how he's laid things out. The figures in the back have that kind of, exceptionally well. The kind of value difference is much higher, so you can see the kind of lightness versus the darkness is a much higher gradient as opposed to the women in the front. And the figures themselves are kind of interesting in various different levels of kind of dressness. It's obviously kind of starting for the day and then almost disrobed, ready for the nighttime. I feel like the clothing is actually the weakest part of this piece, where like he's sort of awkwardly holding up the kind of loose cloth in the background, and the figure on the right here seems very awkward. But I think there are some really beautiful individuals. I think especially kind of the kind of dawning of the day here, really lovely, and midday here, the kind of midday, she's sort of almost kind of stretching out for maybe a siesta or something like that. Some really lovely figures. Some interesting stuff with the kind of actual structure as well. He's kind of curved the kind of ground here at the back way more than a normal horizon line to give that feeling of cyclical nature and movement. And I think the clouds have been rendered in a really beautiful way as well. So I think this is again quite a daring piece here from Morley, and especially for the Academy to include. But again, still something based on kind of traditional forces at the same time. Now, we've got another new figure here. This is Henry Pegram. He's a Londoner, born in 1962, so that will make him about like 50-something here. Studied mainly at the Royal Academy. Now, his kind of big break came when he was an assistant to Hamo Thornycraft. Now, Hamo, I would say, again, is kind of like loosely associated with the New Sculpture guys. I would say that he's more academic, really. He's more like Leighton-esque. He focused very much more on kind of classical and pure Renaissance works, as opposed to the kind of magical symbolism of someone like Gilbert. But still, definitely in that kind of vein. And I would say that, again, Pegram, in my mind, is very much like a B-tier New Sculpture guy. But I would say that Hamo was exceptionally well adopted by the Academy and also society as well. He had a number of important commissions for the Queen, while Alfred Gilbert, for example, he did have like a quite important couple of commissions, but basically ended up souring the relationship with the royal family in the end. And I think that Thornycraft sort of stepped in a little bit and took some of that shine. I don't even really rate Thornycraft that highly out of the New Sculpture guys in retrospect, but you got to recognize that he was one of the premier sculptors of the up to the Edwardian period, basically. And Pegram is his assistant, and he very much follows Thornycraft. Maybe leans in a little bit more to the new sculpture piece. Now, because of that, often his works are again like above average, but I would say nothing mind blowing. And again, this piece here, which is called The Welcome. The welcome to what is the question. Now, interestingly, I did actually track this piece down. It is for sale in America, and it's known, and it was listed there as Spirit Rising. Often with namings, stuff can get renamed by the various dealers as time goes on. I would say that it looks 1,000 times better in bronze than the plaster cast that was submitted. Often there is a bit of refinement between the actual the plaster work and the bronze, or maybe it's just the lighting of the previous photo, but the woman seems way better, and the detail on the man, etc., looks far superior. So we'll just stick with the bronze here, because this does look rather nice. You've got an angel figure on the left-hand side here, surrounded kind of by putti, a man going into the embrace of the angel, and then this kind of woman here kind of being ignored below. I wonder if this is kind of like a take on resurrection. Maybe the guy is destined for heaven while the woman destined for hell. Two spirits, two different paths. In terms of the kind of composition here, there is this kind of circular nature to the piece. It's set in in an octagonal roundel, which again is kind of interesting. Pegram keeps coming back to this shape, and actually there are some other pieces of his that are really good in that kind of vein. So I think this, I would say it kind of looks a bit average in the plaster. When it looks in the bronze, it definitely works a lot better. But again, I would still say like above average, as opposed to kind of mind blowing. Now on to another Shannon. So we have that there are a couple of different Shannons. There's a Charles Shannon, and then there's JJ Shannon, otherwise known as James Jebusa Shannon, which is a great name. He's Anglo-American. I think he's born in America and moved across to London, and again mainly focused on portraiture. But the fact, like, I think he ends up having quite a few big commissions. I see him very much in the kind of Sargent vein. Again, another one of those face painters here. This piece here called Flora. There's something, yes, it's very Sargent-esque in the rendering. So you've got a very tight face, but again, the hair and the hands are very delicately done, and the whole piece is very impressionistic. But it's really quite risque, really, for a portrait piece here. You can see her kind of dress coming down. Her breast barely covered across here. The kind of rosiness of the cheeks as well at the same time, looking out there. She's an aloof figure. There's this kind of mystery to her. There's a playfulness to her at the same time. So I feel like Shannon's kind of pushing like the Sargent vein a little bit further, and making it really, really quite interesting. I think the piece itself, in my opinion, I prefer like a stronger rendering on the portraiture of this time, but I think it's still definitely captivating, definitely interesting, and very nice color wise. It's mainly rooted in this kind of yellows, if you see in the kind of skin tones and in the background here. And then kind of balanced with deep blues and greens, kind of complementary colors to yellow at the same time. So it's a good palette. Maybe a bit of red balanced in the cheeks as well. I like the color palette for this. Okay, we had a Shannon piece last time. Sorry, a Charles Shannon piece last time, and this is another allegorical piece here, Vanity and Scarcity. And obviously there's two figures here. They're kind of sitting around what looks like a farmyard or a barn. They're in front of this kind of like little lake or pond. And again, it's all about the kind of two extremes. Vanity on the left-hand side, she's kind of abandoned. You can see her clothes on the floor here. She's nude. You've got the symbol. You've got the peacock here. Again, this kind of classic symbol of the vanity and luxury. She's beautiful, but she knows it at the same time, and her pose is really quite lovely. On the right hand side, we've got Scarcity here. She is this kind of nun-esque figure, fully wrapped up, but she's holding a small a babe in her arms at the same time. And interestingly, where do the doves fly to? Where do the doves land? Unsurprisingly, it's all about, sorry, it's not scarcity, sanctity. It's sanctity that they're drawn to. Now, I couldn't really work out if there was any kind of allegorical meaning to the kind of background, but if you do have an idea, please put it in chat. There could be something with the flowers as well, but it was quite hard to read off the picture. But I think it's an interesting composition. Often with allegorical, the figures become the main piece, and I think Shannon's really trying hard to include a bit of PRB background in this. There's a lot of time and effort spent rendering the background here. I think the vanity in particular is very, she's very beautifully done, and I like the peacock as well. So this is a nice, a nice piece. Now, interestingly, I did manage to find the piece. It was up for sale a while ago, and I was impressed with the kind of depth of colors. Again, we're seeing lots of jewel tones here, deep reds, deep blues, and actually you can see the second peacock comes out. It pops out a little bit more. I'm still not quite sure what she's holding in her hand. Maybe her heart or a gemstone, or it's kind of, there's an implication here. I would say I feel like someone, I don't know whether it is Shannon or not. I don't know whether this is just because this is a copy or something else, but the faces are not as good here. So if you look at the original, you can see she's kind of turned her head slightly. It's more kind of 3/4. Well, I've got it more in profile here. And the same thing with the babe and the woman on the right-hand side here. They're kind of a bit fuzzier. So I do wonder whether this is maybe like a repro. Also, a couple of the pigeons goes missing. So, but maybe they got painted out. It's really hard to tell. And I couldn't. This is not in a museum currently. It's in a private collection. But I think certainly we get an idea of the colours and the. And I think the colours, make it work and bring us into this kind of rich environment. The pool looks particularly interesting as well. Maybe it's like a watermill at the background. I was thinking there's something there about kind of work and I don't know, grinding or something like that, which ties into this. But yeah, very very nice kind of allegorical piece there from Shannon. Now, we turn to another portrait here, and this is from who I consider to be one of the greatest portraitists of this time here, of the interwar period, by Sir John Lavery. Now, Lavery is really interesting in the fact he like Orpen, is not necessarily Anglo-Irish genetically, but he was an orphan born in Belfast, but spent most of his time in Britain. Got exceptionally popular. He had some serious commissions. I think he's literally knighted by this time already. So he's already had some big important commissions. Whenever an artist has got knighted, that they've done something important for the royal family, basically. He also studied in Glasgow. He's got this kind of important Scottish connection. And again, if you know anything about the history of Belfast, there is a strong connection between Scotland and Belfast. And he basically got his kind of career start by getting in with the kind of rich industrial owners who were all like Scots-Irish, basically. And then eventually moved to London. Now, interestingly, his later part of his life, he was pro-Irish independence and has become an important artistic figure in the Republic of Ireland. I think one of his pieces featuring a harpist used to be on one of the Irish currency notes, for example. But so I definitely feel like he sort of turned his back on British society somewhat, despite being a made man because of it. But just rating his art in itself, I feel like from this moment, his portraiture becomes really quite phenomenal. This piece is good. It kind of shows his earlier style, which I would say is quite Sargent-esque. But he never, he is very prolific in his work, producing an absolute ton of portraits. But he also really improves his style as time goes on. So keep an eye on Lavery. This, I would say, is kind of like another above average piece, nothing too mind blowing here. And we've got Lady Catherine Somerset. So he's already kind of painting ladies at this point, which again kind of marks him out as doing relatively well in terms of society. I mean, I love how she's being posed here. Her body, facing away, but then her head looking quite close to us. It's quite confrontational. There's definitely there's a youth to her, a vitality, and a strength to her as well. So you can see here she's got her hands leaning on a cane. I mean, that's the kind of pose that you'd expect from an old an old lord as opposed to a lady. So you can feel the authority and power and intensity of her. That even though there's that confrontation with her face, she's looking off to the right hand side of the viewer at the same time, and so there's this kind of dance between beauty and subtlety and kind of intense authority at the same time, and you don't want to mess with her. In terms of style, again, it is very Sargent at this point. A lot of attention to detail to the face. Again, the hands relatively loose, and then this kind of black background. But yeah, really nice piece there from someone who's going to be featured quite heavily, I feel, as we go through. Okay, on to this one here, and we've got something a little bit different. I kept going on about spread, trying to get lots of different pieces here, and I think one thing I would say is that kind of genre style pieces, we're definitely making a comeback here, and I think that's tied to this kind of reevaluation of the old masters. That this time period, they're definitely kind of looking at Vermeer and other Dutch masters who are kind of painting these kind of beautifully detailed paintings of the middle classes. And here we've got Walter W. Russell. So one thing I wanted to say is that there's different levels of Royal Academy membership. You've got the ARA, the Associate of the Royal Academy. That means you're kind of like you're in, but you're at the kind of like you're not a full member just yet. And then when you're just an RA, that's like you've properly made it. And a lot of you have to work hard to get to your RA status, basically. But he's kind of already at this point, kind of sort of already part of the group. Now he was born in Essex, and Essex boy, trained at Westminster, and did some teaching at the Slade as well. So good pedigree to him. I haven't actually got his birth date here, but I think he is again one of the kind of younger guys. Now, in terms of the piece itself, like I said, this is this kind of naturalist genre piece. It's I would say an upper middle class family on a Saturday or something like that. You've got the kind of father reading the newspaper by the fire, looking very cozy, while the kind of either it's the girls or the mother and the girls having a chat about like a little beaded necklace. I would have loved to get a bigger picture, but I wasn't able to find it, sadly. But I think it's beautifully rendered. You've captured a really it's when you're doing kind of genre and naturalism, I think it's about capturing a moment in time. It's almost like there's a weird historicism to it. So just like a true historicism painting would be like, oh, here's a famous battle or a famous moment or a meeting. It's kind of like that, but for everyday life. And I think this is sort of sums up that kind of post Great War period. No doubt the father in the background is kind of reliving the traumas of the war quietly, but doing it with a kind of a stiff upper lip while the girls are getting their beads ready to go out on the town to listen to some jazz music, no doubt. But I thought a really nice piece. Again, nothing mind-blowing. Now, something that definitely one of my favorites from this year is Philpott. So I mentioned him last time as someone to watch. He was definitely someone that was identified by the Royal Academy as like an up and coming artist. He's only, I think, 37 at this point, and we saw last year him doing some of his kind of his realism thing, where we know that he can render really nicely, do those kind of portraits of his mother and his family, but he's really interested in symbolism and again some of those kind of turn of the century almost kind of graphic works like Gowan Llewellyn. So this piece here is called The Journey of the Spirit, which again in my mind already sounds like super Nietzschean. Although I couldn't say I knew much about it, but you have these three figures who are obviously huge. The way that he set it up next to these rocks, if they have this kind of feeling of hugeness, because also they're up in the clouds right here. They're kind of like almost gigantic. Um, he's presented them on this kind of mysterious arid landscape. So yes, we can see this kind of red rock at the front. There's not a single bit of vegetation, but he's hinted at the world that they're in through the kind of background here, and it looks like it's even more rocky. There's this continuation of the rockiness into the background. We're definitely either in some kind of other dimension or in an exceptionally arid landscape here. There's an unforgivingness to it, a cruelty to the landscape. Now, I mentioned about them being up in the clouds. I mean, maybe it's clouds, maybe it could be smoke, it could be kind of his attempt to kind of show mist. And again, the way that he's rendering some of these background rocks, it does kind of make it look a little bit misty. But I feel like it's kind of like all like a pseudo cloud. It doesn't really quite feel like a smoke to me. But there's a kind of a very kind of softy fluffiness to it. Normally clouds have a little bit more definition. I think Philpott's giving this kind of otherworldly vibe to it at the same time. What does the sky look like? There's this kind of blue-black color to it, and the kind of only form of light here, interestingly, is coming from behind them. And so these three figures are moving away from the light, which is also, if you see kind of how the light has been kind of laid out on the body here, it's not up in the sky, I think. I think it's sort of like at the mid-level here. If it was up high, there'd be less highlighting on the leg here, for example. It definitely feels like they're all walking away from the light. So again, that's kind of interesting when we go back to the theme again, journey of the spirit. Normally you talk about out of body experiences. Oh yeah, I was walking towards the light. Well, these three powerful figures are walking away from the light. Maybe the light represents life itself, and they're walking together into the unknown. Now, there's two male figures, and it's hard to see, but I can see either a breast or a absolute massive man boob here. I'm pretty sure that with the, look at this comely buttock here. I think this is meant to be a woman on the right hand side. So two men and a woman, and it sort of looks like the men are in communion here as well. It's hard to gauge what they're talking about or what they're discussing. Even this hand movement, it could be let us go this way with that hand, or it could be there's nowhere to go. There's a cliff edge, and it's kind of there's a definite precipice feeling to it. With all of the kind of cragginess and the rocks here. I feel like it's that there's this is about adventuring into the unknown in the spiritual realm. One other thing to say is the feeling of direction here. So yes, we've got all of these horizontals coming in from the clouds, but we've also got the hair which has been swept away in one direction. Again, wind coming away from this kind of light source. So he's cunningly giving this kind of force and power from right to left across in the painting. Now, let's talk about the style here, because if we compare it to what Philpott was doing last year, I would say that his piece last year was very much rooted in something like, again, the old masters, Caravaggio, Velasquez, and it's all about kind of chiaroscuro, kind of light and darkness. But there was a lot of blending in the figures as well. There wasn't this kind of definition. Look at how he's rendered the figures here. He's let some of the underpainting really kind of come through to give it that super graphic quality. There is less chiaroscuro here, really, if I'm honest with you. Yes, there's a bit of value difference, but it's more about kind of all of these beautiful shades of grey. And we just got to talk about the lighting for this middle figure here. I feel like it's just a masterclass in understanding how to light a body. Every single subtle dash of light has been portrayed here, and you can really feel the kind of musculature and the strength of these figures. I mean, I just love how thick the thick the ankles are here. I mean, the poses are also just so awkward. There's something so awkward to the figures, like but I think it gives it that kind of otherworldly quality to it. At the same time, they're almost kind of like the spirits are unfamiliar with their own huge, thick-ankled bodies. I feel like there's also maybe a bit of perspective bending here going on. So I want you to kind of compare the height of the torsos to the legs. Normally it's in like a 50-50 ratio, or maybe even more emphasis on the torso. But I feel like we're getting a lot of leg here. If you think right from the foot across here is a little bit longer than up to the torso. So there is a lot. There is just. I think it's done to give us that feeling that like we're down here on the ground and we're looking up at these figures. You know, it's to help with the giganticism. I just had a question in chat: why the arm position so strange? I think it is just to give this kind of otherworldly quality to it, an awkwardness in the figures, and to kind of show that these aren't normal human beings, but manifestations of the spirits themselves. So I think as a piece, this is highly symbolic. I think it's really quite fantastic. In my mind, totally underrated piece, one of the best pieces of the year, and definitely kind of shows. You know, it definitely marks Philpott out as an amazing artist that has so much range as well, that he's able to deliver something like this, highly symbolic and graphic, while he's able to do his kind of standard style. Kind of like old master portrait thing as well. So, you know, a real master artist and a masterpiece here. Okay, let's go from one masterpiece to another one, and we've got another Orpen here. I was trying to think. The Orpen we had last time was the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, if you remember. So that was kind of like historicism piece, really. Orpen, in my mind, is probably one of Britain's greatest portraitists, and especially on the male side. I feel like I don't know what it is. It's really hard to get a lot out of men sometimes. You know, obviously we're kind of quite reserved, and the goal, I think, of the portraitist is to try and show the character and the nature of the man through the work itself. And we've got here Field Marshal Earl Haig. For those who aren't versed with World War One particularisms, Haig essentially became the leader of the army during the second half of the First World War. His kind of like big nemesis was a guy called French, quite a famous general, right at the center of sergeants' portraits of the officers. And Haig was actually quite good friends with Orpen. Orpen wasn't able to get a commission, I believe, to do art during the First World War. You know, there was a few war commissions going out, and he just basically moved across to Belgium, got a place, and started doing stuff, and used his connections to muscle in. But I mean, that shows the absolute downright narcissism and egotism from Orpen. And I often find when it comes to artists who are narcissistic, you know, often it is not well earned, but in Orpen's case, sadly it is. And you can see with this piece here, it's so beautiful. It's about nobility, but it also shows, I'd know, a somewhat vulnerability to Haig at the same time. Now, I spent a long time kind of reading about him. He is unfortunately responsible for Passchendaele, but he is ultimately responsible for the victory against the Germans at the same time, and a lot of people attributed the victory to his perseverance. And I think it's undeniable that the First World War was a disaster of humanity for Britain in many ways, and it's undeniable that Haig has to play his part in that. But then at the same time, it is undeniable that he was a great leader and managed to defeat his enemy. So there's that kind of duality at the same time. What can we read from Haig? From, like, if you didn't know about anything about him, what could you read from this portrait? And I feel like there is both a confidence and an ability, but also like a sheepishness to him at the same time. I think. I mean, if you were to look at his body, just put a hand up on his, put your hand over the screen over his hands, and that top half for me, it's about confidence. It's about you've got this very confrontational, penetrating glare in his face. He's got the Chad jawline, a great face shape, wonderful moustache here. He is confident in his abilities and he believes in himself 100%. But at the same time, you got to turn to the hands here, and I just feel like there is something about the hands which tells us there is another side to Haig, and maybe there isn't so much confidence after all. He's presenting, the face of empire and the face of being in charge of one of the most powerful armies in the entire world at that time, and he's holding the rod of authority, but he's almost kind of like nervously playing with it at the same time, and one has to wonder about Passchendaele. He even recognised as being a big disaster in his own lifetime, and I think Orpen's managed to capture that that sheepishness and that potential. I don't know about the word regret. I think it's a strong word, but certainly questioning what he's done. Let's talk about how he's rendered this piece. Again, Sargent that's who he's up against in terms of world-class portraiture, and this is very much the opposite. Orpen likes to do a lot of detailed rendering, but also there's a lot like he's not necessarily going full in detail. Like maybe I'd say someone like Strang, for example. Strang was coming up with lots of details on the fabrics and the textiles. I mean, you just, again, this cloak here is relatively impressionistically done, but I would say that there's a looseness to it, but there's also a strong tangibility and almost a kind of graphic element here. He's putting in a lot of lights and shades here, lights and shadows, and there's a strength to the colors, while Sargent would often kind of leave things transparent at the same time. So there's a lot of detailing here on the kind of buttons, and he's kind of really shown off, for example, the medal and award here beautifully. But the face is just so nicely rendered. I feel like it's very stylistic, very open at the same time, but really captures his face. And if you see pictures of him, again, I think should the artist deliver a truthful view of the sitter, or should the best features be emphasized? I always feel like the best features should be emphasized. The point of a portrait is to bring out the best qualities of the man and to kind of lay him exposed before us. And I think he's done that. He's kind of brought out the chin a little bit more, and kind of he's not covered over like any kind of hideousness from Haig, but I think he's, again, like I said, brought out the best features of him. But I think this is classic Orpen, a brilliant piece here, and again, we're going to see him time and time again. Now, this year was a little bit. We had a lot of landscape last year. I was trying to put in a few from here, and this is one of the better ones, I thought, but still, it's kind of like middling here. This is from Bertram Priestman. He is a Yorkshire boy, studied in the Slade, spent a lot of time in Europe, and again was associated with these kind of maritime pieces. This one's called Home. Again, I instantly thought of the kind of the transport ships back home. So imagine you're having to move millions of men back from France and Belgium, all the way back home to sometimes Canada and Germany, and we've captured the scene where you've got this kind of large steam cruiser, and it's disembarking a smaller little steam tug here, potentially laden with soldiers. We don't know if it isn't or not, but I imagined it was. So again, it's captured this nice little moment in time. Something almost a little bit Turner-esque, Fighting Tamarind kind of style, but again, much more detail in the rendering here. So, a nice piece here. Now, carrying on with our landscape vein, we've got another Julius Olsson here, um, the Cornish painter, if you recall from last week, and this one is very much more detail in the rendering here. Handily, they've included the size here, so you can just see the size. So it's 60 inches by 48. So that's, excuse my conversion, but it's about 1.3 meters. This is a big piece. It's much more strongly rendered here. If you look at it and compare, the last piece was very impressionistic, and it's called The Last Rays. We're capturing this last rays of the sunset. The last rays of the sun before it sets. Once again on the Cornish coast, which is again classical Olsen here. Really lovely piece, but I really liked his rendering in the sky. You can just tell that it's going to be really beautiful. Again, I just wish I had the color original of this, because you just know it's going to be filled with, like, I think Olsen's really great with light. You can just tell that he understands it. He spends his time watching the sunrise and sunset. I often think that there are 1,000 colors in the sunrise and sunset over so many different hues, and this is someone who studies the light very well. So this is about light, but it's also about the storms and the power of the waves at the same time. Okay, time for something completely different here. Let's go on to this piece, which is by Maurice Griefenhagen. He's another British painter. I mean, must have had a tough time with a name like that during the war. Now, he was born in 1962, so he's going to be in his 60s here. And again, he's one of those painters that had several lifetimes. He started his career as a book illustrator, poster designer, but from around about 1910, moved out. Got more recognized for some of his kind of pseudo PRB symbolist work. Again, it's difficult to place him, but I would put him in like maybe the symbolist canon. He was an associate member of the Royal Academy in 1916 and also taught in Glasgow. So I would say associated with Glasgow School of Art. I mean, you look at something like this, and I instantly think of Galan Kalele here. This is known as The Vision, and it's obvious that this is a kind of a theological painting. Or I won't zoom in for now here. And we've got two fishermen. They're back home mending their nets, and they've had a vision of the mother and the Madonna and child here. And there's a little kind of group of angels here in the background peeking out. Now let's turn to these figures down here. Now, I mean, you can see with the rendering here, there's something almost Gauguin-esque, I think, about these figures here. It's definitely influenced by the Impressionists, but I think Griffenhagen, he sort of takes Gauguin to the next level in terms of the rendering. Like, Gauguin's very sloppy. Again, I'm generally, sorry to say this, against the slop. I like the tightly rendered, and it gives it this more kind of graphic quality to it. But there's a lot of depth in tone here on the arm. I think this kind of front figure here is just beautifully rendered. The hand, the fingers are, if you've been critical, a little bit off here, but I still think really nice piece. And again, all of the detail of the fishing net here. Notice how the net has kind of been taken, and there's a rigidity to it. If you've ever seen a net, it's got this kind of flaccid quality, but he's turned it into these kind of sweeping lines, which matches up with the kind of graphic element to the piece here. And he's chosen some difficult faces, I would say. The easiest way to, in terms of ease of painting, it's like profile first, then it's 3/4 view. But he's gone for this kind of like down the nose, which is in some ways, I think, some of the hardest ways to do it. But the reason why is he wants the man to be kind of looking up at the Madonna here. And interestingly, despite this kind of amazing heavenly host singing, they're both transfixed on, they're both looking up at the Madonna. Now, I did wonder whether this figure, if you see his eyes, they're kind of like a little bit off and away. I don't know if that's intentional. Maybe it's kind of implying he's kind of blind or something like that, but still moved by the vision. Let's turn to the Virgin here. I mean, she's a very wide-faced virgin, is what I'll say. Very Germanic, in look, but there is a beautiful serenity, a simplicity to her, and this kind of chubby little Christ here. Again, Griffin Hagen's suffering on the hands here from the babe, if I'm honest with you. But I really like her kind of blue outfit here. It's very high value. There is a loose. It's okay. There is a crispness. There's not much blending going on. There's not much depth, but it gives it this very kind of powerful graphic quality to her dress itself. Let's look at the heavenly host here. I like this because it's kind of like a couple of angels squeezing out. This is almost like a medieval illumination or something like that. And I really like the kind of the lute player here. I feel like he could have finished some of the clothes a little bit more, but I think he's just kept the emphasis on the faces. And again, the kind of singing face here is really nicely done. What about the background? Well, we've just got this kind of very simple lake. Again, something like this could be straight out of Matisse, couldn't it, really? And then these kind of the buildings are kind of reduced into these kind of large oblong squares with a kind of dark portals to them. It's almost De Chirico-esque, some would say. Obviously, probably never had any contact with him at all, but I think a really interesting piece. I really rate Griffin Hagen, and I think, again, another RA artist lost. What you tend to find is the same with Philpott, same as Lavery. A lot of these artists, I think, basically get forgotten about because they're not 19th century, they're not extreme modernists of the Fry vein, and they're not, Cubist related. So, one of the purposes of this entire stream series is to try and identify who are the hidden gems, who are the guys that we should have been looking at. Anyway, color palette wise, it's jewel tones. It's these deep blues, purples, reds coming through, yellows, really well balanced. Love this, really nice piece. Okay, let's go for like a bit of historicism again. And we've got this piece by W.L. Wiley. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is a war painting. I basically have a real bugbear against war paintings. Maybe it's my instinctive reaction to the absolute slop fest that is WW2 war paintings. There are just so many really bad war paintings from the Second World War. It's fascinating, like how fast like taste just is decimated. Where World War One has some of the greatest paintings of all time came out of it, but everything is just so cheesy. It's like, oh, it's Spitfires. That like none of it. It's kind of very sanitized. Everything's like a propaganda painting basically. While yes, yeah, I get it that a lot of war paintings are propagandistic, but it's got to capture a moment and a sense of the environment that you're in, and war and the desolation and the power and the scariness, the brutality and the greatness of it at the same time. And so basically, I had essentially written off every single 20th century military historical painter until I'd seen some of the paintings by W.L. Wiley. This is the blocking of the Zeebrugge waterway. I've got to be honest with you, I have no idea about the context of this. I couldn't really find out much about it. Please, I'm sure there's some WW1 history nerds out there. Please tell me in chat what I'm missing out here. But I think what Wiley's managed to do is to really capture that kind of chaotic sense of war that you wouldn't have seen before the maybe like the 18th, like the kind of the Georgian style Nelson ship paintings. I think he's really tried to do that, but in a modern setting. We've got this kind of boat laden with men that's kind of overpacked. They're kind of dragging a guy across here at the same time. There's a kind of an urgency. They're all going to this main boat. They're getting loaded on board. You can see the kind of flares in the nighttime giving these kind of Will-o'-the-Wisp-esque elements to it. This is a painting of like I said, urgency of danger, of escape, of shadows. Look at this kind of ghostly figure here on the right side. Again, I would have loved to find the color version of this piece, but again, like I said, I think this really goes on the right side of historical war paintings, and it gives you that kind of real feeling of being sucked in and kind of pure chaos and order all in one. So yeah, really nice piece here. Okay, back to Spencer Watson. He had one of my favorite pieces last year with the Three Kings. Again, this very, very kind of real, very graphic piece reflecting on the adoration of the Christ child from the Magi. And we've got another theological painting here from Spencer Watson, and this is the story of creation. Now, we've got a lush tropical setting here, representing Eden. Again, look at the kind of fecundity, the fruit on the trees here. Look at all of this kind of fruit laid out here. You know, you get the impression that this place really does need some gardeners at the same time. But the most important thing, we've got this, the kind of trio of figures across here. We've got Adam, Eve, and who I think this is an angel here on the right-hand side. Giving, again, it's called the story of creation. Is the story being told to Adam and Eve, or is it something else? Is this yet the painting, the story of creation? I think he's not giving us any insights into that whatsoever. I mean, let's talk about the figures here. Firstly, you've got man, who he's sort of shifted him to the right a little bit, and that's going to make him a little bit smaller than the angel. Look at the angel's posture here. It's very rigid, very structured, stronger than man. Man is he's kind of almost folded in on himself, but he's also more thoughtful at the same time. And I think it kind of represents the kind of the disparity between the heavenly and the earthly at the same time. The angels kind of pointing up and talking out with his hand. I like his lovely kind of flared up, flaming angel hair. You know, if you're a ginger, I'm sorry for you, but you have the hair of angels, sir. That's what you got to remember. Man is also, super tanned. Now, in the center, we have our Eve. And I got to say, Watson has painted one of my favorite Eves of all time here. Sorry to swear, but just the absolute bitch face on this Eve here is phenomenal. You just know there is such a strength to her. You know, when I talked about in the landscape section about the new woman, this is her across here. They've got Watson's positioned to 3/4 off the screen, but while man here, he's folded over, he's curious, he's sort of doubting, he's unconfident. The Eve just emits confidence and strength here in the center. She's actually taken that central position. Now, I like how Watson's kind of moved her closer towards Adam. You know, you've got that sense of coupling between the two. You know, she's not a free agent, but she dominates both men at the same time. She's the one that's standing up. She's the one that's tallest. You know, if you know anything about, that traditionally the king would always be the highest person, for example. Again, she's got this amazing kind of golden hair which goes all the way down her back. Look at her pose across here, arm against her hip, the strength leaning across there, and then this kind of contrapposto pose. I mean, absolutely brilliant. Again, I love that long Norman face, aristocratic, and her eyes, in terms of the eyes here, we've got the kind of angel, almost kind of looks a little bit bored explaining it. There is the kind of inquisitiveness of Adam, but there's this kind of I don't know, indifference. There's something about those eyes from this Eve here that I just love. One little kind of interesting thing I liked about it is these two figures down here, the stag and the little foal here. I think there's a definite attempt of foreshadowing here. If you just zoom out a second, when I first saw this painting, I thought, oh, look, that's a claw trying to attack Adam. And I think Spencer's definitely put that in there. to give a foreshadowing of the fall, of what's going to happen to mankind. I was looking around to see if there was going to be any fruit from the tree of life, but we can't see it. Or again, if you spot it, please tell me. So, but I don't think it's in the piece. But I think in Milton, Adam and Eve get explained to them about how the world was created. So I wonder whether this is kind of like drawing on the Miltonian epic. Okay, so that is the end of the of Spencer Watson. But again, I thought that was one of my favorites for the year as well. Okay, back to another portrait. This is another piece from Strang. Again, this is one of the better portraits for this year. I mean, I don't think I've got much to add from some of his previous work on the previous year. I think some of the other stuff was better, but again, this very confrontational piece. You can see all the kind of detailing. It's about the fabrics and the textiles, but still that kind of chiaroscuro of the kind of blank backgrounds at the same time. So really nice. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but a nice little piece here from Strang. Now this was I put this in as almost a bit of an amuse-bouche here, a bit of a one-off. This is a piece by Frederick W. Elswell. He is the son of a woodcarver, studied at Lincoln, and then spent some time in Antwerp. And again, I keep talking about. I'm gonna keep banging over the same things, I'm afraid to say, but there's definitely something old masters about this painting. You know, one of the genre scenes from the Dutch, for example. And the piece itself is called The New Purchase, and I thought it was a very amusing and interesting little piece here, where you've got this kind of old boy, old collector. He's got some of his lovely ceramics out here. Again, like Chinese pieces, maybe some Dutch pieces here. And he's got his little magnifying glass. So he's spending a little bit of time looking through and looking at the detail. And I think it's really captured the essence of the elder gentleman, you know, fading away into nothing. While kind of looking while looking at his kind of little collectibles here. The rest of the scene is there's a strong darkness to it. You know, you can barely see the hint of a library across here, but he's well illuminated, and it looks like he is repairing the vase. I think you can see the kind of different fragments across here. So maybe he's bought everything in a job lot and he's trying to repair the pieces together. So you can see there's a broken plate here. You know, maybe he's bought something at auction and is trying to fix it all together again. And again, it's just, is this the most like groundbreaking piece, like something like Phil Potter's doing right now? I'm going to say no. But again, I think as a genre piece, as a piece capturing interest, I think it's really nice, really lovely, and just a nice. I don't think we see Earthwell again in any of the other streams. So yeah, just a bit of a one-off here. Okay, another portrait here. This time from F. Cadogan Cowper. Now, Cowper is actually well known as one of those kind of big PRB guys, really. Again, he doesn't really have that kind of second life in the same kind of way that I would say that Dixie does, but he does occasionally come back with some of these kind of society portraits at this time, basically. And it's definitely worth checking out some of his PRB work. It's I would describe it as very, very feminine. It's focused almost kind of Rossetti-like in its intense focus on certain types of women. But while I'd say that Rossetti is obsessed with the femme fatale, he is obsessed with kind of like the innocence of youth and like innocent beauty is how I describe it. And he's a real kind of color master and a real details master at the same time. So it's interesting seeing him kind of branch out. And this again caught my interest instantly. This is Mrs. Frances Durant, you know, some kind of socialite here, but he's got her in this kind of very interesting setup. She's holding this kind of like ridiculously large ostrich feather fan here. in terms of like the kind of setup, it's instantly Sargent-esque. I would say Sargent loves to do these like long full body portraits, but again, look at the rendering here. It's much more detailed, much tighter. And I really love the attention to detail to all of the kind of pearls and embroidery. The silk, the kind of lace or organza silk here is just so gorgeous, so beautiful. Even though it's right at the bottom of the painting here, you know, you could throw it away, but he's spent the time on it. Or this kind of beautiful flower, he's giving this portrait its all. Let's talk about the character itself, because again, that was the other thing that caught me. She has got this both. It's simultaneously a veneer of kind of friendliness and softness. You know, there's the softness of the fabrics, the kind of light color of her dress, and the softness of the satin. But there is a kind of a coldness and a hostility to her face and her hand, which is closed. You know, there's a strength to it. So, you know, this is someone who simultaneously has this kind of like layer of friendliness and interest, but also there's something tough about her as well. So yeah, very nice piece here. Okay, back on to some more sculpture, and we had a piece from Bertram McKennell last time, and this is another piece here, which is a sketch for the group of bronzes above the Australia House. So if you go down to the Strand, have a look around there. Australia House is on the corner of one of the semicircle, basically, and above the entranceway is this set of figures. And I think it's meant to be Neptune, like with his horses here, and you know, really nice like set up here, where we've got the kind of 4 horses coming out of the water here, and then Neptune at the front here, sort of riding the wave. Now, whenever you talk about the 4 horses, you've got to think about the horses of St. Mark's. Is this at the same kind of level of work? You know, I think almost, if I'm honest with you, they're really beautifully rendered. I mean, look at the muscle grouping across here, really nicely done. I think with horses, it's really difficult to go into kind of pastiche though, and to not show, like, often people will render a horse very accurately, but not have the kind of depth of strength and the vitality of the horses. And I think he's really tried hard to show that. Has he done it successfully 100%? I'm not so sure. Like, I think this horse here looks a little bit goofy, you know, that like some of the other ones don't look perfect, but I think it has been in general really nicely rendered. But I think for me, the main figure in the center is masterful. We actually saw McKennell with the allegory of peace, with her hands wide open, and here we've got Neptune standing forwards here. This is kind of like contrapposto, but he's positioned the leg backwards, so you've got that kind of sense of movement forwards. This is a bit like you know, like he's kind of there is a regalness to him. There's an indifference in his face, but his arms are outstretched. He's wearing his kind of sea crown at the same time, and he's draped by this kind of like single fabric falling off his body, exposing himself. There's a definite kind of force and movement with the piece, and again, I think this is one of McKennell's best. You have to see it live in the person though, because again, it suits the space so well, and again, does all Australians credit with the quality of work, I think. Okay, next one, and this is a piece by a guy called Harold Knight. Now, Knight again is going to feature super heavily in the next couple of years. Him and his wife are kind of like one of the artistic power couples of the age, is what I'd say. Now, Knight, often he kind of varies between portraits and the kind of Vermeer-esque quiet realism. You know, these kind of little scenes, you know, often when you see these kind of Dutch masterpieces where it's like there's a woman and she's playing a lute, and you're kind of voyeuristically looking in through the wall. There is something of that with these pieces here, And you can see here, this is called In the Studio. Is this like his wife? Is this a model? And she's just adjusting her shoe. You can see this is the studio because of the kind of wrapped up canvas here on the right side and all of the work going on. But again, it's trying to capture this kind of quiet moment of beauty with the figure. Okay, last couple to go. This one is another kind of quasi-symbolist piece here from Reginald Frampton. Now, the Frampton family is very famous from Frampton the sculptor. He has a son, Meredith Frampton, and Reggie is his cousin. And basically, there's a definite dual pathways for the family because Meredith very much embraces that kind of sculptural modernism that I go on about, the kind of deco style, while Frampton's is more in that kind of graphic symbolism that we've seen, more kind of Pouvry, more Kalingalila here. And this is Elaine, obviously of Arthurian fame. Elaine has many stories regarding her. She's often known as the Lady of Shalott, doomed forever to weave until she walks outside and then she'll die. But also she's associated with Lancelot, and I think this is Elaine from the Lancelot stories here, where she when Lancelot leaves, Lancelot spends some time with the family and she falls in love with him, and he leaves her shield with her, and his shield is famous for having 3 red stripes on it, and you can see she's created a shield cover for him and she's waiting for him to return and claim it. Now, Elaine is a famed beauty here, and you can see there's a real loveliness to her. She's all about lightness and purity at the same time. But there's a grand melancholy, and in some stories, she in Tennyson's Idylls, she just dies, basically dies of sadness, and then gets sent back to Camelot with the shield on her body, rather famously in this like a Waterhouse painting. Now, I really love this. Again, this is almost kind of like Macintosh-esque, like definitely Glasgow style. But his father was a stained glass maker, and I think you can definitely feel some of that coming through. Definitely influenced by French symbolism at the same time as well. So, really nice piece, highly graphical. I often kind of goes into the twee, but this is one of his better pieces, so I've included it here, and it's been rendered really nicely. Great shadows on the body, a real sense of melancholy, good handwork. Really like it. Okay, when we're on to our last piece, and this again is another like a one-off amusement for me, a guy called Monroe Mackey. Now, he is the only artist, I think, out of everything that I was not able to find out information on. And this is called the Black Onyx, and obviously that refers to the jewel on her hand. But again, this is a portrait, but almost there's something definitely Elizabethan about it, whether it's the kind of raised collar and the kind of quasi-ruff here. So I don't know whether it's intentional, but there's also a strange kind of occult darkness to it with this kind of mysterious figure, and even the hand positioning is very strange. That this is the only portrait we've seen where the sitter sits directly towards us and stares straight into our eyes. So there's this deep intensity to it. So fascinating piece. Monroe does not feature in anything else at all. So this is like a bit of a one-off, but really interesting piece of work. So that is it for 1921. Hope you enjoyed it. I think for me, the standout pieces has got to be the Philpott spirits, definitely the Shannon, Shannon creation, and then the Orpen portrait. All brilliant pieces. Again, I think there's just a lot of daringness inside the collection. Still really impressed, and I think there is definitely a new energy and a vitality coming through from some of the artists. So keep watching this space. The next couple of years are going to be really interesting. Please leave some comments about some of the pieces that you liked and thought were interesting, and your favorite pieces, and spend a bit of time researching the artists as well. But let's leave it for now, and I'll see you next year.